Welcome back to Get a Grip on Lighting. On today's show, it's a great pleasure and honor to be joined by the lighting industry's journalist, I would say, Al Uszynski. If you don't know who Al is, I'm not going to give a big long introduction. If you don't know who he is in 2025, you're probably not paying too much attention to the lighting industry. So we're going to speak to Al in a minute. But before we get there, Greg, we got to go to halcolighting.com, back and nailed.
That's right. And hey, what I love about what they're doing is a retrofit commercial downlight. I run into it over and over. A lot of commercial buildings have these downlights, pot lights, can lights, whatever you want to call them. But they're doing it right. A lot of people did it and said, oh, we're going to do a 6-inch or an 8-inch, or we're going to do this Kelvin temp. They have 4, 6, 8, 10. They have 5 color temperatures, 90 CRI. They even have a white or an aluminum trim on it. So everything you need in a recessed can light, Helco has. So get them, use them, do it.
And I think they support Inside Lighting as well. Inside.lighting, Al.
Yes, Inside Lighting has long been a partner with Halco. In fact, we're located in Atlanta. They're just up the road, about 20 miles in Gwinnett County. And I live in a 30-story high rise. And we did a project where our HOA committee, they said, hey, we got a lighting guy. We should consult him on this. They already chosen Halco. So they came to me to say, are these a good light fixture brand to light our stairways up and down the 30 stories? They did a great job. They were even a little under budget, and the quality has been good now for over a year. So yeah, big fan of Halco, and glad they're sponsoring this.
Check out halcolighting.com. Of course, they're going to be in Minnesota in a week or two here, Greg. September 22nd and 24th, where all the top Gs are going to be of lighting. The Nailed convention is happening. If you have light bulbs in a warehouse, folks, like, I know we say this, but not everybody has light bulbs in a warehouse, Greg. Like, there's lots of people in the lighting industry that don't have light bulbs in a warehouse or light fixtures in a warehouse. They don't sell them over the counter. They're not dealing with replacement components. They're not dealing with burned out light fixtures. They're designing. But if you have light bulbs in a warehouse, this is your association. Go to nald.org. Welcome back, Al.
You know, guys, we usually do this at the end of the year for the New Year predictions. So here we are in September, an unscheduled powwow among the three of us. Hello, Greg. Hello, Michael. Great to see you guys here.
Great to see you as well. Al, tell us about the Lumy Awards.
Well, thanks for asking, guys. The Lumy Awards, it's Inside Lighting's largest undertaking, our biggest project since launching Inside Lighting itself. We launched it in August, and the Lumys are really, it's a new fixture awards program. Fixture and Control is awarding the best of lighting products that have been launched over the last year or so. And, you know, I did it because I saw a lane open when Light Fair went to every other year, and the list of exhibitors is now at a low that's the lowest point since the early 90s. There's a lot of great lighting products that aren't being represented in the Light Fair Innovation Awards. And there were 3 lighting publications that ceased publishing, 3 lighting trade pubs that ceased publishing in 2024. One of them, LEDs Magazine, had this one program called the Bright Star Awards. So I didn't just see a lane open to monetize. I actually saw a need. I think there's lighting products, lighting controls, and I saw a need to have a 6-category contest that isn't just handing out participation trophies, because some of these, there's global lighting awards for different products. One of them had 66 winners last year. This happens in Europe. So, if there's 66 winners, I don't think there's any winners. It's like giving everyone who gets a C+ or better, here's your blue ribbon. I'm making this where we have 6 categories, and there's 4 finalists per category. And then per category, there's just one Lumy winner. And this is the trophy that they get. They get the Lumy Award trophy, 14 inches of black crystal with the yellow line like the logo. So this thing is ready to go. And we're excited. Greg, do you want to ask me what 6 categories there are?
Well, I was going to ask that, and where you're going to present it, and when are the deadlines. Give me it all.
Perfect. This is year 1, so it's all virtual. We have 6 judges who are going to be rolled out once per week. By the time this airs, we probably are halfway through that list with our weekly reveals of judges. And the 6 categories are very, very straightforward. So we have indoor luminaires, outdoor luminaires, lighting controls, lamps, components, which would be LEDs and drivers. And then we have one which I think your nailed audience is going to love because it's stocked goods. Sometimes there's a great wall pack or a great strip light or a great stairwell light or exit sign that does a really nice job. And sometimes they're not going to get, when they're competing against some of these fancy schmancy architectural fixtures, they're not going to get their moment in the spotlight. So the Lumy Awards is changing that. We're creating a way to spotlight 4 finalists and 1 winner. And we're excited about bringing that to the lighting community.
Wow.
I think it's awesome. Something we need.
Yeah,
Thank-
and you know
thank
what
you.
though, I remember LED Magazine's awards, and I do think that there's room for some more product awards out there. So hats off to you, Al, for the Lumy Awards.
Yeah, happy to do it. And I'm happy to get involved in that. So thanks, guys, for that. What else are we going to talk about?
Why does journalism matter at the industry level, Al? Why is it important to have journalists?
I don't know if I could have answered that question well when I kind of got started into this thing full time a little over 5 years ago now. But now I see it as a way to just be more than a bulletin board of here's what's happening, here's a deadline, here's what this association is doing. And I really have gotten really immersed into this journalism trade publication of Inside Lighting to provide bigger context, bigger historical context about if a story hits our wire today, what happened 2 years ago, 10 years ago that matters today, or what happened 6 months ago in that market that influences that decision today. So I like to bring in some of that institutional knowledge that I've had as a lighting person since the 1990s, and it's really fun. And I try to do it in an unbiased way where people won't see my stuff and say, "Hey, he was leaning this way or that way." I try to present it in a fair and honest way, and it's been fun.
Hey, I know we've talked in the past, but I've got a few questions. I just want you to rattle them all off. I'm going to tell them, then you give us your thing. So I want to know what year you started, if you ever look back at those original articles you did, and then how you've changed over the years.
Yeah, so I started it as a side project anonymously in late 2016, but I really went all in full time at the early 2020, right before COVID, actually. And when I look back at my first content, whether it's articles or the way I did graphics or even videos, I cringe. And it's just like if you guys were to compare your polished podcast video persona now to your early days, you might see lots of room for improvement based on what you guys were doing last decade. So I think that's just a normal evolution. And as far as what I learned, and was that the last question, Greg? What
Yeah,
have
yeah,
I
yep.
learned? Yeah, I think I've just learned that sometimes stories are difficult to tell, whether it's about a bankruptcy or a layoff or other things. And I think sometimes I would shy away from that. But what I've learned is if you're fair to the story and if you're fair to the subjects of the story, giving them a heads up, hey, we're going to publish this news. Could you help fill in these blanks for me? Sometimes they'll no comment. Sometimes they will. I think if I realized I thought my first business was journalism, but really a lot of times it's confidentiality, being trusted
Mm.
for them to tell. They tell me 10 things and I only publish 4 of them, but it allows me to write a more responsible article. So that's kind of one of the lessons that I hadn't realized until I really got deep into it.
And one other item I was wondering about is timing. Like I know that some people and some organizations, lighting, whatever, news, everything, feels that it's important to break the news and say this is first without
Mm.
always having all the facts. How do you monitor that? How do you factor that in as you're doing your stories?
Yeah, I think it's a good balance. You want to be timely, but you also want to tell the story. So if company A acquires company B, you see a press release, and you could just copy and paste that press release and throw it on a front page as headline news. And I did that in my early days, and I thought that was fine. But now I think taking an extra 2.5 hours, and in this world of lighting news, I mean, is anything really that urgent? If it's it's not moving financial markets. It's an interesting story to lighting people. And I've learned, Greg, that if I take the extra 2.5 hours and put some thought and context into it and say, hey, this is their fifth acquisition in 2.5 years, and it's the first one in this category, and it's the first time that they've bought a company outside the US. And if I can bring more context into it rather than just copying and pasting a press release, because if you think about it, a press release, whether it's for a financial quarter or whether it's for some company news announcement, it's written by marketing people. So even, and do this in
Mm.
your, if you guys own stocks and you see a stock goes down on a day because they had a bad quarterly announcement, go read that press release, and you'll think that everything is just flowers and unicorns,
Sure.
because they put their best foot forward in these
course.
press releases, even with a bad financial quarter. So I try to dig deeper and do that stuff, and that's one of the lessons too, Greg.
And
Before
I
I,
don't know
oh,
terminology. Sorry, just one last thing is,
sure.
but
Yeah.
it's like your investigative journalism. Is that what you call what you do?
Well, I still have imposter syndrome. I didn't go to Northwestern for journalism, university and anything. So it's but yeah, sometimes we have to investigate, and we have to, contact various sources and say, hey, we're working on a story on XYZ topic. Would you mind sharing some stuff on or off the record? And most of the time, people don't want their name in the newspaper, so we respect that. But yeah, I think I wouldn't say a good portion of what I do is investigative. It's certainly not. I would say it's more research than investigations. But either way, it's been fun, and I really enjoy it. I get up early and I pounce on it, and it's been a fun ride.
I know the day that Al started taking his career as a journalist seriously, Greg, and that was August 3rd, 2020, when he appeared on episode 146 of Get a Grip on Lighting. So that was in
It's time.
2020, Al. Before you put out two recent articles, one that I loved and one that I hated. Okay. But I respect both of them. I think they were great articles, great works of journalism. So recently you had commented on Nailed's open letter. Okay. And I really, it's interesting. You talk about journalism. Journalism creates publicity for the people that are being written about. Okay. So it's not like when we put out, people are saying, why did you put the tone of the letter so, why was the tone of the letter so, rough? But that's what we were looking for, a response. We wanted to be honest about our frustrations, but we're looking for a response. You read that open letter and you said, you know what? I'm going to write a story about this. I'm not just going to post this. I'm going to ask the DLC what they think. How did that process of creativity go? How did the journalistic process go when you got the open letter through to writing the article?
Yeah, first of all, when it comes to trade organizations, just we have an announcement section where we post press releases as announcements, and so we have because we want to promote and help trade organizations get their message out. We usually just post it as a courtesy freebie in our announcement section, and that's what we've done with Nailed in the past. So I first thought this was yet another open letter or statement from Nailed that was destined for my press release section, but then I actually started reading it and realized that this is more newsworthy than it is just to put it in the press release feed. So that caught me at a weird time. First of all, Nailed went against like the PR rules. If you want to get a message to the masses, you don't do it on a Friday, but you did it anyway on a Friday. I remember I saw it. I was reading it while I was at O'Hare Airport on my phone, running to the airline club, and I'm like, "Ooh, this is actually news." And so I went through it, and then of course, once I realized that yes, I do need to publish a story about this, I contacted the people at DLC to see if they wanted to comment, and then I really had to work on structuring that. So this is mid morning that it hits my feed, and I was actually in the air at 3 p.m. Eastern time when I actually hit publish, because I wanted to make sure I was crafting this in the right way, especially since there were some fiery things put into that. I wanted to make sure I just wasn't, throwing gas on that fire. I want to make sure I was explaining it in a fair way that that kind of highlighted some of the points and add some context. And yeah, you guys made some news on September 5th on that Friday.
Yeah, Nailed made some news. Get a Grip on Lighting didn't make some news.
Correct.
Get a Grip on Lighting put out its podcast on Monday called "Stop Tinkering." But what's been the response to your article on Nailed on the Nailed letter, and what has been the response subsequently to DLC's letter back?
So I'll start with the response to Nailed. So I mentioned that Friday afternoon publishing at 3 p.m. Eastern, especially since we're still kind of on the summer habits. That's not a popular time for anyone to visit Inside Lighting. I mean, we still get good visits, but it's not a peak time. But it took off, especially when I posted it on LinkedIn, where we have a pretty strong following. I saw the clicks coming through from LinkedIn, and it was heavy traffic into the evening Eastern time. And what I would say is the response was not so much about, hey, Nailed has spoken, here's their stance. it's kind of like, have you guys ever, like, if anyone who's been part of a big company and you have that town hall meeting and there's that one brave employee who stands up and says something that everyone's thinking but isn't brave enough to say it, or a city council meeting where a citizen does the
Mm.
same thing. That's why I think it resonated, because in the orbit that I live in, where we're talking to a lot of stakeholders from, you know, distributors, specifiers, manufacturers, agents, there's been a kind of a rising wave of uncertainty or disgruntledness regarding some of the policies that the DLC requires, that puts pressure on their business in negative ways. And now with that deadline approaching for this version 6.0 public input, it's been a lot. It's been a lot of noise. So I think there were a lot of people who said, "Wow, they said it. I'm not going to put my name on that, but I'm glad they said it." And that's what happened. Moving forward to 5 days later, on September 10th, there was that Wednesday that we published the follow-up article where DLC. And by the way, this is just my hunch. My hunch is that DLC doesn't want to get in a back and forth every time Nail says something about DLC. DLC doesn't need to respond, and I'm sure they don't want to respond. But this one had been so thorough and maybe effusive with the sharp elbow tone that it took, that they did put out a page and 3/4 type statement that we published and added some additional analysis and point counterpoint with as well.
And did you get some feedback on that? I know it's relatively new.
Yeah. Haven't gotten a lot of feedback on it, other than people saying that they appreciated, like, the translation of, I think we broke it into 5 different sections where Nailed said this and DLC
Hmm.
countered with this, and here's where they stand. Because if all we did was just post the 2 letters, then it's like, okay, folks, here's 2 letters. You figure out who's right, who's wrong, or where they differ, where they agree. And I tried to do that in a kind of a point counterpoint way that showed, where they had disagreement.
Well,
Yeah, no.
what's interesting is that Al is demonstrating journalism. Okay, with that, if he just posts the open letter, there's a subtext to that that's not being said, that I don't want to comment on this. And then if you are in favor of one or the other, but I think you did an excellent job, as a journalist, at looking at how to present the arguments so people can make their own decisions. And that's journalism. You're giving it to people in a way that allows them to think about it from DLC's perspective and to think about it from Nailed's perspective. And I think that's the power in what you do. Where do you think we're going to go with this? Like, Nailed doesn't want to respond either. Like, guys don't mind doing interview. We're all volunteers. Everyone at DLC is paid, right? Everyone at Nailed's a volunteer. Big difference. So Nailed doesn't want to get into all this kind of thing. Where do you think it goes from here?
Well, in the letter, Nailed did call for DLC to cease all future, standards changes, and then to sunset their organization and leave the industry in 2030. I bet a month's income with each of you that that's not going to happen. So I don't think that DLC is going to voluntarily say, okay, we're leaving. So what I do think is that we have to find a way, DLC and together with the stakeholders, everyone, including the Nailed stakeholders, but also I listed off a bunch of my contacts and how I'm embedded in the lighting industry. But one area where I'm weak from a contact perspective is the utility side of things, and those people that run efficiency programs and rebates programs. I imagine that there's people on that side that actually appreciate some of the benefits of the work that DLC does, and frankly, their input needs to be heard as well. So where do I think we go? I don't know. I would love to hear from
But Al, why
from
is why is the lighting industry serving the utilities? Why? Like, you have to understand how DLC is structured. So DLC represents the utilities to the lighting industry and dictates the biggest market for lighting to the lighting industry from the utility perspective. The utilities have no skin in the game with those lights. Nothing. Why are they telling us how to design lights?
Well, I think the utilities want some sort of standard so that it's like why a restaurant needs to have like an FDA approval on the hamburger meat that they serve, or USDA, pardon me, USDA approval, because they want to make sure that there's at least a minimal standard, that it's not a bunch of crap or energy
It is a
sucking
bunch of
fixtures.
crap.
What do you mean?
DLC Premium does not certify quality of light or fixtures or length of warranty or how long it's going to last or anything. It's simply an
Right.
energy efficiency certification.
Right. Right. So I think if you're driven by rebates, I
It's
think
actually no,
that's
it's a
probably
lumens per watt certification, which isn't
efficacy.
energy.
Yes.
Yeah, energy efficiency has nothing to do with lumens per watt. Lumens per watt is a very minor part of energy efficiency when it comes to lighting, and we've turned our entire industry to serve some kind of prescriptive rebate-free money thing that utilities are giving out. I think this is a huge mistake.
So when I hear these debates, the one question that comes up in my mind is, so where would we be if there wasn't a minimum efficacy standard? Where would we be if some of these other, the Luna standards relating to some of those things for outdoor lightings, would we be better off? Would we
Way
have
better
just
off.
the same
Way
challenge
better
in a different
off.
way?
Way
So even
better
though
off. If we
so I,
didn't to build the entire destroy the lighting industry and
mhm.
rebuild it to serve electrical utilities lumens per watt criteria, we would be in a much better position as an industry. And we,
Well, how
you know,
so? How so?
because you're being like, let me ask you this. If you had a good, if you had a good idea for lighting, okay, and you're a manufacturer, or you're doing some research and development and all that sort of stuff, if you want to be able to sell light fixtures, you got to tell the DLC what your idea is so that it gets included into their feedback. And then the DLC turns around and sells you your own idea back to you and gives that to everybody else in the lighting industry, including the Chinese. The whole system is broken now. That is not the way to go about deciding how designing lights should be done. That is not the way to do it. And all the problems we have in our industry are because we decided to create an industry that served the bizarre needs of prescriptive rebate programs to make it as easy as possible as utilities to give away free money to our industry. That's what happened.
This is something you're very knowledgeable about, very passionate about, and I'm not on the front lines anymore, guys. So yeah, obviously I know you didn't invite me on here to debate this or to stand up for
No.
DLC, and I'm not seeing it that way either. But I guess where my mind goes is then, okay, so if you guys are, or I should say, Nailed is calling for them to leave the industry. I don't believe that's a probable outcome. So, what type of reforms should all the stakeholders, not just Nailed stakeholders, but all stakeholders, really, move to see so that maybe it's more palatable than what it is today? I know manufacturers are complaining about some of the extreme costs, not just for testing, but on fixture redesign. This new efficacy standard is reachable, but it's instead of having 120 LEDs in their product, it now has to be 160 LEDs that are underdriven, and that creates a major redesign project for families and families of products. So there's lots of costs associated with this, and I understand the pain involved. So it'll be interesting to see. They're reviewing the feedback now. It'll be interesting to see how that comes out on the other side. What their reporting is after reviewing all this feedback and seeing what changes, if any, come from the draft to the final product. I'll be watching, and I'm sure you guys will be watching even more closely.
That's why we need stabilization, Al. That's why we need a 5-year moratorium on all changes to energy efficiency certifications. And then they can do that. And I'll bet you a month's salary that they're going to do that. That'll do. Well, if they leave the lighting industry, I don't like long bets that go on forever. I don't like that kind of stuff, but maybe I'll take that. We'll talk about it after off air.
But
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
yeah, I was going to jump in. The thing that bothers me about the whole process is just the transparency aspect. Like it's out there now. It's all known. Who in the hell is D plus R, and why are they getting all of this QPL money? What is their process? Why does it cost so much? Where does that money go? So we've invited him before. Let's invite him again. David Steiner, Tina Halfpenny, come talk to us. Talk to Al. We can all talk it out. We can record it, and then the industry can hear exactly how it works. That's what we want.
Yeah, that would be very interesting, and I would suggest that even the most ethical, and no one here is blaming them effusively of lack of ethics, but even the most ethical, well-known, nonprofit organizations probably wouldn't, be overly transparent with some of the stuff that Nailed has been asking for. But I think you're right. Some level of explaining some of these things. I know that I've been on the IRS website to look at their annual filings, and the IRS is years behind. So I think the latest one is from like 2021 or
Mm-hmm.
2022, and all you see is a lump sum number, and so we don't know exactly where it's going and all that. I also thought Colligan was bonkers when he was saying on past podcasts about how they're a 501c charitable organization. I'm like, he's got to have that wrong. But sure enough, I checked it out, and yeah, they are, and it's under science and education that they can claim that, and they do qualify. It's a very loosely defined thing. In fact, Greg, your Minnesota Vikings, that's a for-profit company, but the NFL, the home office, they're a nonprofit company. The NFL, the home office is the league office, and so there's very loose rules. So it's not DLC's fault. They're playing by the rules the way I can see it on that nonprofit thing that you and Nailed have questioned in the past.
Greg, you want to get it? You want me to?
You go for it. Yeah,
Okay.
that's my
So,
main point.
and I just want to put a little period on the sentence here before I change subject, because we have another interesting topic that I've been seeing on Inside Lighting with people write-ins on the IES ballots, which I thought was a really interesting article as well. But yeah, I like in terms of, it's not about the people, okay? Greg and I have no beef with anybody that works for DLC. Actually, I think Tina Halfpenny is a very smart, intelligent woman. Okay, like I think she's very smart. But I think that the structure is fatally flawed, and what the industry needs is a 5-year moratorium, and then I'll answer all your questions in 5 years about what's going to replace DLC. But right now, we just need stabilization. IES. So Greg and I were talking earlier today. I was speaking to you off the record, Al, about IES, and their numbers are down, Greg, right? Their membership is down. They're trying to, they're taking steps to increase their members. We need a strong IES. Greg has been advocating for years, asking more from IES, more leadership from IES for the entire time this podcast has been running. Greg has been saying,
why are we doing this?
Yeah,
IES isn't. That's what it came down to.
Yeah, Greg didn't want to start a podcast. I always did. I never found a microphone I didn't like. But Greg didn't really want to do it. I had to kind of chicken wing him into it. But Nailed has had, we've ran Nailed since 2019. We've had contested elections every year. We send out the email. We say, hey, who wants to run for the board? We talk to our members. We tell them, hey, there's a board position available. And inevitably, every year, we got at least 2 vendors, at least 2 members. So one year we had 5. A couple years we had 3. And you know what? It really pisses people off when they lose that election. I'm telling you, it's like we almost wish we could just cherry pick the people we want, because it bothers people when they don't win those elections. And then sometimes they're like, they stop going on committees, or they don't come to the convention the next year or whatever. But we do it every year. We try to get contested elections every year. We try to tell every member of NAIL that there's an opportunity to serve on the board. The fact that IES is consistently throwing why are you even having an election? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's a 100+ year old organization. They have these pages and reams of paper that are their bylaws, and it's been one of those things since all 3 of us were born, that they have this nomination committee that is not the board. I think there's 1, maybe 2 board members that are on the nomination committee, but it's mostly non-board members, and they do this selection process. So there's people that self-nominate or are nominated by others, and this year there were 6 positions up for grabs, and who knows if there was 3 people per position or 20 people per position, but ultimately the nomination committee decides to kind of move just 1 person per available seat onto the ballot. And guys, I was clueless. Like, I've been an IES member since the 90s, and I think it was like 15 years ago when I like looked at it, and I'm like, why is it that there's never anyone running against these people? Like, I didn't realize that this was the process. And now the ballot, when they announce the ballot, that's basically announcing who the president's going to be in 2 years. So because it's just 1 person who eventually gets elected because there's no other major competition. But this year, as you've seen, there is now someone who's forging a write-in campaign. His name's Ira Rothman. He currently serves on the board of directors. He was the treasurer of the society a couple of years ago, and he's a longtime lighting person, lighting designer, lighting rep, lighting manufacturer. He's worked in all parts of the business. He's out of Boston, and he's very passionate about offering his skills and leadership to the position. So it's a real write-in campaign, something that IAS people I talk to, none of them have in their memory remembered anything like this. So it's all playing out in front of us right now. The voter turnout is typically 12 or 14%. So there's Ira's role is really not about swaying people's minds, but getting them to vote, writing in his name. And if he can get, turnout to be 20, 25% or more, he might have a good shot at it.
Yeah, no, I think it's something we talked about before that it's okay to do though, right? Like have contested elections, have people interested, have people that are going to step up and take a leadership role is what I want. And what we talked about before is IES to be back at the leadership spot. Take charge, stand up.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. Sometimes the arguments against a contested election is that sometimes it turns into a popularity contest, or maybe
That's what
the
it
the
is.
background and the
Mm.
background or skills of that person doesn't fit the needs of the society at that very moment. So I can understand kind of both sides of the coin. And frankly, it's one of those things where you can't fight City Hall. I'm just a member, and I'm just gonna move on with my life. I don't spend a lot of time fretting over it. But there are some people who every year that ballot comes out, they're on social media saying, I'm once again disappointed that the IES isn't giving us choices, especially since they're going through some challenges. Maybe we should open this up to be more of a democratic process. So I can see both sides of the coin. I actually would like to see, maybe if I had to choose one path, maybe I would like to see a contested election just to see how it works. And and if it doesn't work, then maybe we go back to the old way. But we can't be wishy-washy either with their bylaws, because their bylaws are very serious.
Well, they're a huge. Oh, excuse me. They're a huge nonprofit, a very big nonprofit in comparison to others, but not as big as DLC. Probably about one tenth or 1/5 the size in terms of revenue. Isn't that interesting? That the IES, the strongest lighting organization, often involves a lot of volunteering and all that, and then we have this bizarre 501c3 charity that gets 5 or 10 times as much revenue from the lighting industry than the IES does. That's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, folks. In the meantime, go to halcolighting.com, Greg Eric. For I don't know Halco that well. They just joined Nailed, I think, this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were members before and
Mm-hmm.
they had some ownership change, but yeah, great company. They do have a fairly long history in lighting, and their commercial downlight, awesome. 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, all the colors,
And
everything.
all the top G's in lighting, no, just kidding. All the top G's who have light bulbs in a warehouse are going to be in St. Paul, Minnesota from September 22nd to 24th. If I'm not sure when this one's going to go out, so it could be after, it could be before, but the final word goes to Uszynski, Inside Lighting. What are your final thoughts for Get a Grip on Lighting?
Hey, I appreciate what you guys are doing. We have a very traditional thing we do every New Year, and we're going to get the champagne out. We're going to put the glasses on, guys. You have your glasses on right now. Guess where mine are? They're on the floor. They fell on the floor at about minute 12. So let me bend over and get those.
Come on.
I'm back. I'm back. Here we
There it is.
go.
All
So
right,
we are
baby.
in for 2026. Our annual lighting predictions for the new year pod is coming out first week of January. Put it down on your calendar. We'll see you in 26. But until then, go to the Nailed convention, listen to Get a Grip, download and listen, and go to that Nailed convention. Thanks, guys, for having me. Great seeing you again.
Bye for now.